Imagine an army so vast, it darkens the horizon, the largest force a republic has ever sent to war, 86,000 strong. Its mission: to find and obliterate a single hated enemy who has humiliated them on their own soil. Now imagine that colossal army in the space of a single afternoon, being utterly devoured, trapped, surrounded, and systematically annihilated in a perfect killing box designed by one man. This was not a battle. It was a massacre on an almost unimaginable scale. This is the story of Rome's darkest day, the story of the Battle of Cannae, and the day the world witnessed the terrifying, immortal genius of Hannibal Barca. The year is 216 BCE. For 2 years, the Carthaginian general Hannibal has been a specter haunting the Italian peninsula. He had achieved the impossible, marching his army, complete with war elephants, over the treacherous Alps. He had already defeated the Romans twice in major battles, at the Trebia and at Lake Trasimene, humiliating the proud republic. In response, Rome had turned to Fabian tactics, a strategy of delay and harassment, refusing to engage Hannibal in a pitched battle. But the Roman people were impatient. Their pride was wounded. They clamored for a decisive victory to crush the invader once and for all. And so, they amassed the largest army in their history, a force of 8 massive legions, and sent it out with one simple command: destroy Hannibal. Command of this mighty force was given to 2 consuls who rotated command on a daily basis. They were polar opposites. One was the cautious, experienced nobleman, Lucius Aemilius Paulus, who respected Hannibal's genius and subscribed to the Fabian strategy of avoiding a direct confrontation. The other was the plebeian, rash and arrogant Gaius Terentius Varro, a man who had won his office by promising the people the one thing they craved: a glorious, head-on battle to vanquish the Carthaginian menace. This fatal division of command would prove to be Rome's first great weakness. Hannibal, meanwhile, was a master of manipulation. He knew the Roman mindset. He knew their arrogance, their thirst for a decisive victory, and the fatal flaw in their rotating command structure. He deliberately marched his smaller veteran army of 50,000 men south, seizing a massive Roman supply depot at the town of Cannae. This single move was a stroke of genius. It not only provided his own army with desperately needed food, but it placed him in a position that the Romans could not ignore. He was now threatening their allies and daring them to come and fight. Lured by Hannibal's bait, the Roman consuls marched their army to confront him. The ground near Cannae was a wide, flat, dusty plain bordered by the Aufidus River. It was perfect cavalry country, ground that Hannibal had chosen and the arrogant Varro had blindly accepted. On the fateful morning of August 2nd, 216 BCE, it was Varro's day to command. Ignoring the protests of the cautious Paulus, he ordered the legions to form for battle. The Roman deployment was a testament to their strategy: pure, unstoppable, brute force. They massed their 86,000 soldiers into an incredibly deep and narrow formation, far deeper than it was wide. Their plan was simple and direct: to use their overwhelming numbers as a giant battering ram, to punch a hole straight through the center of Hannibal's line and crush his army from within. They placed their cavalry on the wings, but the heart of their plan was the sheer, overwhelming power of their infantry. Hannibal's deployment was the mirror opposite. It was a masterpiece of subtlety and deception. He placed his weakest troops, his Spanish and Gallic infantry, in the very center of his line. But he didn't arrange them in a straight line. Instead, he pushed them forward in a convex crescent, a shallow bow that bulged out towards the Romans. On their flanks, hidden in reserve and set back, he placed his finest soldiers, his battle-hardened African veteran infantry, armed with captured Roman armor. On his wings, he placed his superior cavalry, commanded by his brilliant subordinate, Hasdrubal. Every piece was in place for the perfect trap. As the battle began, the massive Roman legions surged forward with a deafening roar, their target the weak crescent of Gauls and Spanish soldiers in Hannibal's center. The initial clash was brutal. The Gauls and Spanish fought fiercely, but as planned, they were slowly, deliberately, pushed back under the immense pressure of the Roman advance. For the Roman consuls, everything was going according to plan. They saw the Carthaginian center buckling, and they urged their men forward, pouring more and more legions into the bulge. But what they perceived as a breakthrough was actually a carefully orchestrated illusion. Hannibal's center was not breaking, it was bending. The convex crescent was slowly inverting, becoming a concave U-shape, drawing the Roman legions deeper and deeper into a pocket of their own making. While the Roman infantry was being drawn into the trap, the decisive action was happening on the wings. On Hannibal's left, his elite Spanish and Gallic heavy cavalry under Hasdrubal slammed into the much weaker Roman cavalry. The fight was short and brutal. The Roman horsemen were shattered and driven from the field. But Hasdrubal did not give chase. In a display of incredible discipline, he rallied his men and led them on a sweeping charge across the entire rear of the battlefield. He slammed into the back of the other Roman cavalry wing, which was engaged with Hannibal's light Numidian cavalry. Attacked from both the front and the rear, the second Roman cavalry wing disintegrated and fled. Hannibal's cavalry now had complete control of the battlefield. The trap was now ready to close. The Roman legions, having pushed so far forward, were now packed tightly together, their flanks exposed and their forward momentum spent. At that moment, Hannibal gave the signal. His elite African infantry, who had been held in reserve on the flanks, now wheeled inwards, smashing into the vulnerable sides of the deep Roman formations. The Roman legions, attacked from the sides, were caught completely by surprise. Their deep formation, once their greatest strength, now became their deadliest weakness. The men in the rear ranks could not see the new threat and continued to push forward, while the men on the flanks were being cut to pieces. The organized legions began to transform into a panicked, confused mob. Then came the final, killing blow. Hasdrubal's victorious cavalry, having eliminated their counterparts, charged into the rear of the Roman infantry. The encirclement was complete. The largest army Rome had ever fielded was now surrounded on all four sides. The Roman battering ram had been drawn into a Carthaginian killing box from which there was no escape. What followed was not a battle, but a methodical, industrial-scale slaughter. Trapped shoulder to shoulder, unable to even lift their arms to properly swing their swords, the Roman soldiers were annihilated. The dust kicked up by tens of thousands of men blocked out the sun, turning the field into a hellish, claustrophobic cauldron of screams, blood, and death. The consul Paulus, who had fought bravely amongst his men, was struck down and killed. By the end of the day, somewhere between 50,000 and 70,000 Roman soldiers lay dead on the plain of Cannae. It was the darkest day in the history of the Roman Republic. In the aftermath of the slaughter, as Hannibal's exhausted but triumphant army surveyed the field of carnage, one of his cavalry commanders, Hannibal, urged him to march on Rome immediately. He famously declared, "If you make use of your victory, you will dine in 5 days' time on the Capitol." But Hannibal hesitated. Why? This has been one of the greatest debates in military history. Let us know your theory in the comments. Historians argue that Hannibal's army was exhausted and in no condition for a long march and a difficult siege. He lacked the specialized siege equipment needed to take a city as well fortified as Rome. More likely, his ultimate strategy was never to destroy the city of Rome itself, but to break its power by convincing its Italian allies to defect to his side. He believed the victory at Cannae would be the final proof that Rome was no longer invincible. In Rome, the news of the disaster was met with utter terror and panic. They had lost the flower of their youth, an entire generation of soldiers and senators. Any lesser state would have collapsed and sued for peace. But it was in this darkest hour that the Romans showed their most defining characteristic, an unbreakable, stubborn resolve. They refused to even receive Hannibal's envoy. They immediately began raising new legions, enlisting slaves and even criminals. Rome would not break. The Battle of Cannae is remembered as Hannibal's greatest victory and the perfect example of a battle of annihilation. His tactic of the double envelopment is still studied in military academies across the world to this day. Though it did not lead to the final defeat of Rome, it cemented Hannibal's legend as one of the greatest military commanders in all of history, a genius who, on a dusty plain in southern Italy, achieved the impossible. The killing box at Cannae stands as a timeless monument to tactical genius. It is a story of how cunning can triumph over brute force and how arrogance can lead to utter ruin. It was the day Hannibal Barca carved his name into eternity with the blood of an empire. If you were captivated by this story of strategy and slaughter, please hit the like button and subscribe for more epic tales from history. And for our final question, do you agree with Hannibal? Should Hannibal have marched on Rome? Let us know your verdict in the comments below. Thanks for watching.